Enjoy local voices. Enjoy local opinions. All on one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts, featuring some of the DC area's best personalities, pundits, and provocateurs. Earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts you love instantly. With new programs being added every week, don't hesitate. Download Podcast DC now for free. Available in the App Store or in Google Play. Podcast DC. Listen local.
Say It Loud Network and Mino Lion Media presents Business First.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Aline. I am your host, and today we are going to talk with an expert in the construction business. The construction industry is a wide industry, one that encompasses everything from construction management and contracting to civil engineering, masonry, and carpentry. But those of you who are familiar with the industry know that it is one that has often been closed to people of color and women. And so today we have a Black woman, Ladi Goldwire, who has been quite successful in this industry. Welcome, Ladi.
Thank you, Sonia, for having me.
How are you today?
Introduction. I'm well.
That's great. You have an interesting background, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things, but I think our audience would love to hear about your journey in the construction industry, because it is, at the very base levels of construction, like I said, whether it's carpentry and masonry, or construction management, it's a very competitive business, and it's one that has pretty much been closed off to Blacks and to women. And you've been able to carve out a niche and develop a company that has an interesting twist. You say that you like to mix concierge with construction. And so tell us a little bit about your business, and then I'd like to go back and we can talk about your journey to where you've gotten.
So, I'm the principal owner of Bryn Mawr Construction and Development Group. I come from a lineage of tradesmen. So, my grandfather was a tile setter, tile layer, block and brick mason. I've been around it my entire life. I just finished having a conversation with someone else, and we were talking about my father's idea of what it would look like for me in construction. He thought that I would make a great secretary very early on, just because of the insight that he had back in the day, right? So, to be able to get out here and do what I do, I'm a general contractor licensed in the state of Florida. I'm also a building official licensed in the state of Florida, but certified in all 50 states. It's interesting to see the trajectory that the industry is on, and the possibilities and opportunities that are presenting themselves to both people of color and also women. And so I'm excited about that. It's been an interesting journey, as you noted, Sonia. And, it's not for the faint at heart, I will tell you that. Right. But it's definitely worth exploring. I think women have this phenomenal edge over other demographics in terms of just make the best of really tough places when it comes to decision making. And so at the end of the day, I'm very, very happy to have been in the game as long as I have been, understanding that it's not easy for everybody and just looking for an opportunity to create us.
What you say about, it's interesting that your dad thought that, you would make a great secretary, because that's, at the time, women were not exposed to a wide variety of roles in this industry. But we do have access to more information today, thank goodness. But I feel anyway, and this is how I feel, you can let me know if it's accurate, but it seems as if the construction industry is intimidating. So where there may be a lot of more opportunities open for women and for minorities, having access or to getting started in the industry seems intimidating. And so you had the good fortune of, kind of being surrounded by it. And so that's good to know that you grew up in the industry, practically watching your dad and your grandfather. But what would you suggest to someone who might be, considering something different, looking for an opportunity, and happen to stumble on this podcast? Like, what would you suggest to someone in terms of the opportunities that await for them?
Well, the first thing I would say is, particularly if you're female in this industry, is just to kind of lean into the feminine superpowers that we have that just come natural. I think those characteristics that make us women make us great constructive experts. They make us really, really good project managers. They make us really good problem solvers. And so, the big lesson for me going in was just recognizing that I was obviously different. I was going to stand out, but to figure out a way to capitalize on the differences. And it's worked for me. Being a woman and being a person of color, always coming from the vantage point of, having to make the best out of, not so ideal situations on a regular basis. You kind of master maneuvering. If anything construction related is mirrored with, problems, material shortages, timeline inconveniences, all of those things that make, the whole idea of getting a project done from start to finish a thing. But when you come from, a space in life where you're navigating difficult circumstances on a day-to-day basis anyway, it's almost, you kind of fall in line, and it aligns itself with just being able to figure it out. And that's kind of where I've been in it. I've taken, some of the life experiences that I had and kind of applied them, and then taken finesse and femininity and tapped into it. And it's really worked for me.
Okay. Can you give us an example or two to really help us understand how you've used your life circumstances? And I totally understand when you talk about using, your femininity and who you are as a total woman. If you could explain that a little more, because I think sometimes people do feel like that might be a weakness, or that's the reason why I may not be successful in this business.
Well, I think, you just have an understanding that, you need to understand what your intention is behind some of the actions that you take. So there have been many occasions where I couldn't even get an invite outside of just being a woman. There was really no intention to include me or make consideration for any input I had. But just because individuals believed I'd make great company, sometimes the invite was extended. Once I got into the room, I was able to kind of turn on the lights and demonstrate that I was worthy of being there. I tell people often, we talk about just having the ability to sit at the table, but the reality is, if you can't get in from onto the street, if you can't get into the building, you can't get into the room, you can't get into the table. And so I think a woman thinks those things through, and can be a lot of gripe about not being taken seriously. Just getting there is half the battle. And if you can get that under your belt, you're able to move the ball forward. And so my perspective has always been get there and then deal with it as it comes. It just gets tricky. It's something, though, that I think women do well when it comes to just maneuvering and getting a really good handle on the rooms and the spaces that they're in. And if we just trust our intuition a little bit, the fact that we come equipped with these superpowers, I think it'd be easier for us. A lot of times we have these seeds of self-doubt. We're letting the wrong people into our heads. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's girlfriends. That's what it was for me. And that can be problematic. You just have to tap into what you know about you and get there. And once you get there, the rest of it kind of works itself out.
Right. And when you said girlfriends, was it advice to, because when you were talking, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because women and people of color have to fight in most areas.
Right.
And what is it for you that makes the fight, if we can use that word, what is it for you that makes the fight worth it?
It's the conquest. It's understanding going into the game that, the expectation is that you can't last, you won't last, you'll be half as good. And then being able to get there, like we talked about, and sustain and prevail. That's what makes it worthwhile. That's what makes you do it kind of over and over and over again. Very early on, when I got into construction, I always grew a full head of hair, always felt, pretty, always wanted to look a certain way, but very early on, just believing that it was too much and not really sure about, leading with being a woman, cut my hair really, really short, just really got outside of
trying to fit in. Yeah.
I picked up a lot of 4-letter words and used them quite frequently, drunk out of beer bottles, you name it, just to kind of work my way into the equation. But as, time passed and I evolved and I started really paying attention to, again, what made me different, I said, let's just try to lead with that. And so that in turn, growing my hair out, coming to meetings in A-line dresses and my favorite pumps, just because that's what I felt like, and being heard. I was really, really careful. When I went to meetings, I would notice all of the men would sit to the table and spread all of their things out. And me, by nature, I would get to the table and keep everything so tight and compact, almost giving off a vibe that, I wasn't sure of myself. And it just really got down to me tapping into observing how men operate, how, if I can say this, white men operate, the ownership that they more or less have. And then, on the flip side of that, watching Black men and understanding the dynamic that they were caught in when it came to fighting with them about being equal. As soon as I figured out or observed that counterparts were not interested in equality as it pertained to me, they were more concerned about being equal to their male whites than they were about us being equal across the board, then I started maneuvering a little differently all the way around. It was a game changer. Girlfriends too, eliminating a lot of the conversations with them about not being sure or trying to figure out whether or not I belonged or if they thought I belonged. I just cut a lot of that back and decided that I was going to do what I was going to do, make it my own. And that's worked.
So you bring up a really interesting point, and that's the one of the importance of observing and studying the room. I've read and I've written about the importance sometimes of just being silent and the power in silence, where you can just watch how people operate, see what's going on in the room. Even Stephen Covey, one of my favorite quotes from him is "Seek first to understand and then be understood." And so this opportunity to sit back and observe has really served you well, hasn't it?
It has. I have a very confrontational personality, but in order to confront and win and come out on top, I have figured out that there needs to be some observations made first. I need to understand the opponent, the layout of, each and every situation that I'm about to embark upon, and then kind of develop a game plan from there. And that's more or less how I've been able to approach it. I think trying to do it any other way is self-destructing, because without understanding what you're up against, you don't know what resources you're going to need to rely on to kind of persevere. So patience is critical.
The comments that you had received from your friends, were they more like protective? Like suggesting why are you putting yourself through this? Why would you want to fight this hard? Why would you do this? Was it...
Well, first, a lot of them just didn't understand why construction,
Right.
I had some family members and friends who thought I should pursue law, more traditional profession for a female, especially once I ventured off into the code officiating aspect of my career. There literally are only, I think there's probably 3 African-American building official women in the state of Florida. There's probably 20 in the country. When you look at that profession, it is very, very limited. And a lot of people would say, well, maybe, get lost in that, be a small fish in such a big pond. But, it just depends on what your intentions are. And my intentions have always been to try to create space for the line of women behind me. There's so much that can be done in this industry to actually do better than men. But without them having somebody to look at and see doing it and doing it well, there's no options really for them to kind of piggyback on. And so it's just really important for me to try to get out ahead of the game and create some space for. And I think that was probably the messaging that I would always give to my girlfriends. And slowly but surely they've come around now that I've made it my own.
Now that you've, exactly.
Like, why do you want to be out there with all those guys? And nobody's going to take you seriously. You can't wear this. You're too shaped. You're going to be distracted, But figuring out a way to make it all work for you or to make it work for me has been an interesting journey, but it's coming together. Right. It's coming together.
So that people understand your trajectory, can you start from the time that you were hanging out with your dad and your grandfather? Like, what were the steps? Like, did you major in something in particular when you went to college, or?
So interesting enough, my story is very different. I did private school most of my elementary, middle, high school years. Unfortunately, or, now looking back, fortunately, I was pregnant very early on in life. I had all of my children before age 19. So I did attempt college, but at some point I needed to deviate from that path because it just wasn't sensible in terms of earning a living. Vocation was what I had always been around. And so I wanted to try my hand at what vocation had offered me. Vocation has been a phenomenal alternative to college for me. I've been able to afford myself a very, very good living. And so it's nice to be able to have the conversations in an era where we've got so many people who have gone to college and they are aspiring and stacking degrees, from floor to ceiling and find their way. Having a vocational trade to kind of fall back on has always been the messaging that I've tried to be a part of because I've seen what it's been able to do for me. That same vocational education has allowed me to put my children who chose college instead of vocation through graduate school and postgraduate school. And so it has its benefits. That journey is non-traditional. I definitely don't recommend that people go out and have babies before they can afford to and before they have a plan. But, life has a way of working itself out, and it has been.
And being inspiring to other women who think that, because, there are those of us who work really hard and know that there are possibilities to move forward. And then there are others who feel like, maybe my life is over. And so you serve as a really great example of what can happen no matter where you are in life and whatever choices have happened. Because at the end of the day, it's a cliche saying, but it doesn't matter where you start, right? It matters where you end up.
So let me say this, Sonia, that means everything coming from you. I have been a fan of yours for probably the last I saw you it was the first time I saw you do interviews at the Black Enterprise Network. And, I remember when you were doing the interview, like hoping and praying that I would get interviewed. It counts full circle. Have you acknowledge that is super dope. I'm very, very appreciative of it and the opportunity. And, it's just like you said, things happen in life. Typically, if it's happening to you, it's happening for you. And
for you.
I'm just good with where I've landed as a result of vocation. It's been very, very good to me.
Absolutely. And you've been working with a lot of women. You advocate for women and for small businesses in particular run by women. And so what are some of the things that that you are saying to them, and in terms of what you see them struggling with? Like if you were to look at, and we know if you run a business, there are a number of things that we can struggle with, but what are you seeing that happens consistently, and what is some of the advice that you offer to women?
Really is, what I would say to most women is you just have to believe that you're enough, And that was my biggest struggle very early on, not believing that I deserved to be in this room, not knowing whether or not I had what it takes to stay in the room. It's been a struggle. I've been struggling over my book for the last 8 and I'm kind of at a standstill, but it's entitled Woman, You Are Enough. And it's basically just a rundown of how we just have these conversations in our head about why we don't deserve the opportunities that present themselves to us, and how we talk ourselves out of really fabulous lives when, I believe for all intents and purposes, fabulous lives are destined for all of us. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just how we go about the chase. And so that's typically my messaging. I love being able to work with younger women. I like the opportunity that present women how to become sponsors in addition to being mentors, because I think that's huge. And then just quieting that noise that kind of comes with the imposter syndromes that so many of us deal with regard to whether or not we deserve all the good stuff that's waiting for us. So that's kind of my thing. That's what that's the biggest conversation to have with yourself, is just to reassure yourself that you're enough and that you're deserving of the things that you are going after in life, looking forward to meet you right where you are.
And we've been hearing that a lot. The people say, believe in yourself and believe that you're worthy and believe that you're enough. How accepting are women to that message?
I think it's important, Sonia, to, first of all, you have to give yourself that grace. I think we all should be allowed the opportunity to have thoughts about, just self-evaluate and just making consideration for how we got to be where we are and all of the work it took to get there. I think it's when you let the thoughts linger that it becomes problematic. I think if women just knew, to give themselves more grace, just to operate in the grace that's out there waiting for us, I think that is relieving in and of itself. There have been tons of times where I have had those conversations in terms of, oh my God, lady, like I've had my whole career was dismantled a few years back. In federal litigation, I was plastered all over the news, arrested. I mean, you name it, in my space, operating as a building official, making tough decisions up against very, very wealthy developers. And they kept calling into question my experience. They kept past choices, like I said, coming up on this trial in the next couple of months, it's rooted in gender equality and equal pay for equal work. And the argument on the other side was she didn't deserve to be there. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you see it plastered on the media forums and in the papers. And but you just have to keep having the conversations with yourself. And if nobody else is aware of all of the work and the hours and the sweat and tears I had to put in to be able to secure some of them. And I think it goes that way with a lot of us. Sonia, I look over, all of the things that you've been able to accomplish. It doesn't even seem like it can be done in one lifetime. You know what I mean? And I just don't think we give ourselves enough grace. Other people looking on always know how phenomenal you are. Sometimes it's a struggle for us to see it in ourselves. And that's where the work is,
Yeah, and you were so right. I do struggle with that. But you bring up another really important point, is having faith in yourself. Right. Yeah. And the other piece is, and I'd like you to talk about this, the integrity, because I know you can't talk much about this case because it is currently in litigation, but you were arrested. You were discredited.
Yes.
And demeaned, in the press. And so for things that, if you had gone along to get along, things could have ended up maybe a little easier for you. I mean, you could have gotten in trouble later on as well, but or maybe not. But the ride would have been a lot easier. And so I think what's really important is for people to understand the importance of sometimes standing alone when it's the right thing to do can be really difficult, but it's still the best thing to do.
I agree. It's been tough, but it's been worth it, and again, that's where you make consideration for all. You know how many women who are going to surge this industry, who are looking to give their very, very best with the expectation that they're going to be compensated equally. I mean, that's just a fight to me worth engaging in. And, a lot of times I've found out some of the stuff that I've gone through hasn't even been about me per se. It's usually about something that's going to happen down the line. I'm so stoked about the 24th, June 24th, I get an opportunity to give a keynote address to the graduating class for girls. And these are young girls who had some difficulties in mainstream school. This organization is dominant in South Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, and they really pour into young women. But when you think about just having an opportunity with girls who were similar situated to yourself, I can look at it, 30 years down the line where they are now and say, okay, well, now I understand why I had to do and go through X, Y, Z, because, people don't want to hear gone through anything. And I think just being able to put all of that stuff in that perspective and keep it moving is great. I feel as if I've already been triumphant in the space of, this litigation has been 4 years long. We're at the tail end now, and there have been so many small victories along the way. It's totally been worth the headache and the angst, because I believe, separate from just all the case law and the precedents that'll be set in the whole matter, it'll just look really, really different for women in male dominated industries. Just being able to be heard and make the argument is monumental. And I'm glad for it all at the end of the day.
Well, when it's all settled, we definitely want to be able to have you come back so you can really tell the story. And maybe that'll be a second book that you'll have to do, or a volume 2 to the book that you're working on now. Tell us a little bit about the business that you currently run.
So Bryn Mawr Construction, like I said, it's been around since 2006. It really is rooted in it's a combination of bricks and mortar. That's the name. And my maiden name, March. And the whole concept was just building something for my dad and grandfather to see. I'm fortunate enough that they're both still living. I've got one 95 and 72.
Oh,
so
wow.
They're both still hanging out. And, they come from an era where they believed that women could only be secretaries. And granddaughter has a company. I'm delving in and have always kind of done new construction, residential construction. We do some commercial build outs, but this COVID phenomenon has had us really focusing on renovations, remodels, helping out developers push their permits through the permitting department, and the lag that's been occurring with people being off from work. And so it's been a culmination of a few things. Learning to pivot in this whole pandemic has been critical, but I'm making it work. And it's a blessing to be 15 years in the game when so many companies in the 2008 crash, those companies crash. You had the COVID scenario, and we're still here. Very happy about that. Very happy about it.
All right. So the concierge portion of your business is all of the, like the back end, helping developers, working with developers, and then the construction piece is actual construction and so design. And
we marry the two. The officiating experience has come into been I've been able to use it. It's very, very handy. Developers are wanting to move their projects forward very, very quickly. And, building code is a whole nother language, and understanding it, understanding how to maneuver through it and around is critical, critical to timelines, critical to saving money. And so being armed with that experience and being able to now work it from the side of pro developer, it's really, really worked out well.
All right. And it sounds like it's a unique spin in this business as well.
It's very niche. It is. Even more niche than that, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, is this new vein of construction that's kind of emerging, and that's this industrial hemp space. Hemp is becoming very, very popular with building materials on the rise, an alternative to your wood and concrete mainstream products. It's cannabis, and cannabis is on the uptick, and there are less than 3% of Black people in that industry altogether. When you talk about industrial, probably a third of that. And so it's a great opportunity for people of color and women to kind of jump in now while things are evolving and developing, and really, really make a name for yourself. So exploring that under the umbrella of Bryn Mawr has been something that I've been focusing on too for the last year. I've had the wonderful opportunity of being one of the founding members of the United States Hemp Building Association out in the Midwest, and that is growing. Members are growing. The membership is growing phenomenal, I should say. And it's, the pandemic was so terrible on so many levels, but on the flip side, it was also so rewarding. People got to spend time with their families, really examine where they wanted to be in their careers, what they weren't going to do anymore in their careers. And, it's just been, depending on the way you choose to look at it, I think it's been very opportunistic all the way around.
The cannabis industry is burgeoning, as you mentioned, but one where people are trying to figure out, with all the laws, the federal laws that are changing and being implemented, how they fit in. Construction is a very competitive and intimidating business. And so now you're looking at the industrial hemp industry. Like, where would someone even begin to consider going in that direction?
The internet has tons of information. I would also join. USHBA is a great organization, ushba.org, ushba.org. It's a great organization to kind of get your feet wet in. One of the things I'm passionate about with them is about the opportunities that present itself to minorities and just people of color, specifically people of color. It's been their concentration, which is unique because at one point there were only 2 African American, both of us happened to be women on that founding. The rest were white men. And so it's interesting that they would have that perspective, because that's just typically not the case. I would encourage anybody that is interested in also, checking out a lot of the trade shows. The internet is very, very fresh. It's information about hemp. It's a product that's been used in the UK, Europe, Canada, and Asia for quite some time. So, at the end of the day, it's worth looking into.
So what's going to be next for your company? The industrial hemp is a big piece of what you're interested in going forward. Any other goals in terms of the direction of your business? You're advocating for women. You even you had organized a couple of protests last week in the wake of George Floyd's murder. You're very much a businesswoman, but you're also very socially aware, socially motivated. What are some of the things that you'd like to be able to combine and introduce to people who could obviously benefit from it?
Well, I'm definitely trying to move out of the space of working so hard in my business. I think I spend a lot of time running around my business as opposed to running it. But I think that's something that people talk about often as entrepreneurs. I'm really hoping to put systems in place that will allow some of the stuff I, really want to do. I have a grandson now that I'm eager to spend a lot of time with. I'm really looking forward to the opportunities that are going to present themselves from the industrial hemp side. But my passion is rooted in self-empowerment for women and mental health. Being able to advocate for the mentally ill. I have a 26-year-old son who was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder while he was in college, and that has been a real journey. I'm proud to serve on the board of directors for the National Alliance. There's been a lot of conversation about mental wellness just in the wake of COVID and people just feeling kind of burnt out. We've seen all of the phenomena around Naomi Osaka and Taraji Henson and Michelle Williams, who will be the keynote at this year's NAMI conference. And so looking to kind of phase construction out in such a way that it kind of runs itself so I can do all of the stuff I really like to do when it comes to community advocacy.
What would you say is your strength, your driver, what keeps you solid? I mean, I've known you over the years, not personally, and I'm honestly really inspired by just all that you've gone through and that you've always had this very calm, very pleasant demeanor. I mean, always. And, so you were a young mother, you were in an industry that is competitive, you have a son that has a mental illness. What would you say that sustain, and you've been able to build these, businesses and coordinate projects and start numerous projects you've been able to initiate. What would you say that just really, because that's a lot. It's a lot for one person to manage, and you've been able to manage it, and you can still smile and laugh and show up really strongly.
Well, part of my journey has been just trying to be honest about it. I've done a really good job of making it look easy, but it hasn't always been, if I'm telling the truth. I think I am typically super busy or always trying to keep myself busy, not to sit still long enough to just have to think about everything that's going on. Because if I did, I really don't know that I'm equipped to deal with it all full force. I like to compartmentalize what I can deal with. So today it may be my son, tomorrow it may be work. I've got to put them into them as I can. But if I tell the truth, in shame and all devil, I don't always have it together, and I do have a lot of breaks. I suffer from extreme anxiety, but you work through it. I like to stay busy. I like to continue to create things, and just having family. I'm responsible for a lot of people, and having knowing that and moving in the capacity of just making sure I'm in a position to be able to take care of those responsibilities, keep you going. I don't really know that I have the luxury to, but I do know that, it's not normal for anybody to those lows for extended periods of time. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to teach myself. That's kind of what I was working through in the book. It's kind of the conversations that I'm trying to have moving forward. I don't know that I need to do it all at 100% now. I don't want to make or normalize the level of chaos that I've been able to manage, because I just don't think that that's healthy. I think, figuring out a way to balance most of this stuff and do it so that by the end of the week, you're not completely zonked out. A lot of the things and the people around you is important. And so that's where I'm at right now, just trying to balance it all.
And I think you speak for so many of us when you say that, because that phrase, never let them see you sweat, is not a good one. I think it is important important for people to see you sweat or to be able to talk about it and to share. And I'm so glad that you were able to share as much as you did about your background, because that's the other thing sometimes that haunts us too. It's keeping these secrets or trying to appear a certain way adds another level of stress, hoping that people don't either find out. So I applaud you for being able to share, and I'm sure the audience is grateful that you were so open and able to share as much as you did with us today.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. And you know, we're wishing you all the best with your court case, and we'd love to have you back where you can talk more openly and honestly about just the results of that, because those things you can't talk about pre-trial. And so, thank you. Thank you so much. We all wish you the very best in your journey, and we look forward to hearing much more about you in the future.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It was good talking to you.
Thank you all for listening. And please, please, please stay connected by following us on Instagram. You can follow me personally at Sonia Aline. And please follow business_first_podcast. And thank you for joining us. And we will talk again soon. Take care.
Business First is hosted and produced by Sonia Aline. Edited by Ken Johnson. Executive producers, Omar Thompson, Andrew Kalb, and Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Lion Media and Say It Loud Network production.